Most jazz beginners spend hours on scale practice that doesn't help them play better solos. I used to do this as well until I discovered how easy it is to create scale exercises that fit right into your solos as great licks. And this didn't only work for me, it's helped thousands of my students learn to play solos with a real jazz feel. So in this video I'm going to show you exactly what to practice and how to easily turn it into solos with great jazz vocabulary. Let me first quickly go over some mistakes that you want to avoid because they waste a lot of time here. And then I'm going to show you what to practice to make your solos sound better, including some tricks that I learned from Barry Harris. This might sound like health or diet advice, but you play like you practice. If you only run scales, your solos will sound exactly like that. Predictable and mechanical scale runs. My take on this is heavily inspired by what I learned from Barry Harris and checking out a lot of bebop. Take a look at this part of a Charlie Parker solo. There's a lot more going on than just running up and down scales. I'm gonna show you what to work on later in the video. A huge goal for a lot of guitar players is to be free on the fretboard when they're playing. And it is tempting to think that running scales all over the neck will let you play anything, anywhere. But that's like trying to run before you can walk. If you don't have any real vocabulary anywhere, then you're just learning to sound boring all over the neck. It is actually a lot faster to master one position and then expand outwards, making sure that you can actually solo everywhere that you practice. An important part of jazz improvisation is focused on locking in with the flow of the chords in the song. But scale exercises mostly just ignore this, so you don't learn to really see the harmony in the scale. And in that way, the scale practice just isn't helping you play better solos at all. But how should you set up your scale practice to help you play better solos? Let me show you. Let's be honest, just running up and down a scale isn't what makes a jazz solo sound interesting. But of course, you do need to know the basic scale, like this C major scale that you probably already have under your fingers. But if you check out jazz solos, you'll notice that there's a lot more going on than just scales. And one of the biggest secrets, learning to play arpeggios, specifically 7th chord arpeggios. These are like the salt and pepper of jazz. Without them, your solos end up bland and forgettable. Why are the 7th chord arpeggios so important? Now, there are two reasons. They are everywhere in the solos. You can see that already in this short example from a Charlie Parker solo. There are more arpeggios than scale runs in here. Now, the other reason that you want to learn 7th chord arpeggios is that for jazz songs, the basic chords, the basic harmony that makes up the song, it's all 7th chords. So having that already connected to the scale will make it a lot easier to use them and solo over the song. But there is a way to make it easy to learn them with a step-by-step process. Let's dive into that. You already know your scale, so now let's build up to the 7th chord arpeggios step by step. Now luckily, arpeggios are stacks of thirds, so a good exercise to start with is just playing the scale in thirds, which is this exercise. This is a lot easier than going straight to the arpeggios, and the magic goes even further because if you stack 2 third intervals, you get the diatonic triads. And when I say diatonic triads, I just mean the triads that you get by stacking thirds on each note of the scale. And now you just add another third interval, and then you have the 7th chord arpeggios. Keep in mind that it's very useful to know which notes are in the scale and which arpeggios you're playing. That will help you already in the next exercise. Now you want to explore using this in real music and especially on real songs. And this can be about playing arpeggios through a song like this example on the beginning of Fly Me to the Moon. But don't stop there, you also want to create lines with the arpeggios, putting together arpeggios, scale notes and chromatic phrases, something you will see a lot more examples of in this video. Now that you have some basic exercises and easy ways to connect them to the music, let's look at how you create scale exercises that actually make your solos sound better. If you want to sound like a real jazz musician, just playing the right notes is nowhere near enough. Jazz is all about rhythm, melody and phrasing, the way you play the notes, not just which ones you choose. And that's the problem. Most people practice scales without any of that. It's like trying to learn woodworking but insisting on only using a hammer. There are other tools. Let's fix that by building exercises that sound like real jazz starting with rhythm. This is another exercise that I learned from Barry Harris that really changed how I thought about practice, because it immediately clicked with the music I was listening to, showing me where it came from and how I should use it. Now, if you look at the Other Bebop solo, you have two arpeggios that are played as triplets. The F major 7 arpeggio and this B flat major 7 arpeggio over the G minor 7 chord. Both are played as 8th note triplets with a chromatic leading note before the first note, which for the C major 7 would give you this. And just to demonstrate that this is really a chromatic leading note, if you play it for the D minor 7, you get this one. This clearly sounds great and really flows, and obviously you want to write a lot of licks using arpeggios like this. But it also makes sense to turn this into an exercise which will not only make it easy to play these triplet or bebop arpeggios, but also help you explore them for all the diatonic arpeggios. And that will be this exercise. And that will make it a lot easier to come up with lines like this 2-5-1 lick using the arpeggio from the third shortcut over D minor 7, G7 and C major 7. I'll explain the arpeggio from the third in a second. That is a bonus that you get from this exercise without putting in any work. The arpeggio from the third concept is about using arpeggios over a chord that contains a lot of chord tones so that it sounds like the chord, but it also adds beautiful colors to your solo. For the 2-5-1, you have D minor 7, G7 and C major 7. And you can see how the diatonic arpeggios from the third of each of these also contains mostly the same notes as the chord and then adds a 9th over each of them. You can actually see in the fingering that they have the same notes because of course we have the D minor 7 and then the arpeggio from the third is F major 7. So the first three notes are in both of them. The same goes for the G7 and the arpeggio from the third is B half diminished. And of course C major 7 and E minor 7. And you see this in the example as well. So the beginning is that F major 7 arpeggio played as a bebop arpeggio. Now the B half diminished is disguised a little bit, but it is in there, that's this one. And then on the C major 7 you get the E minor 7 arpeggio, again played as a bebop arpeggio. So practicing diatonic arpeggios in the scale gives you more arpeggios that you can use in your solos, and now you also have a way to add some bebop rhythm as well. Now before we get to a triad trick, let's just quickly cover a variation of this that's also very useful. This is a very easy variation of the bebop arpeggio which takes out the leading note, and it's a great way to lead to an important note in a chord, but I'll demonstrate that in a bit. Here's the basic version. Can you hear how the melody is really framing the A here? So the last two notes of the arpeggio is really bringing out the A. Let me show you how well this works for highlighting a note in a line. If I'm improvising over a C major 7 and I want to use the E minor 7 arpeggio, that really frames the C. And then I can follow that up with a chromatic enclosure and I have this great line. Now if you're wondering what a chromatic enclosure is, this line is over a C major 7. I'm playing the third E, but instead of going straight to it, I'm first playing the F, the scale note above, and then the D sharp, the chromatic note below, creating a bit of movement so that I can resolve to the E. And you can easily turn this way of playing the arpeggio into an exercise like this to really explore how it works for all the chords in the scale. But this doesn't only apply to the 7th chord arpeggios. Let me show you how you can take a great Parker-inspired triad lick and use it to both get flexibility in the scale and learn some beautiful bebop vocabulary. Here's a trick that I picked up from Barry Harris. If a phrase sounds great in a solo, try turning it into an exercise, because that way you can use it all over the place. This very simple line sounds really great. Essentially, I just see this as a scale run, so this, and then I'm adding a descending first inversion C major triad to the C. So breaking it down like that makes it a lot easier to move it through the scale. Now you might not have thought about it, but actually turning a phrase like this into an exercise is in itself super useful. You get a better overview of the fretboard, you build your music theory chops, get more flexible with scales, and most important, you add some classic bebop vocabulary to your solos. It's pretty impressive for just one exercise. So maybe ignore my version and try making this next exercise yourself. And of course, experiment with creating your own exercises as well to get the most out of the ideas. But of course, you can also just get the PDF on my website. Arpeggios and triads are a huge part of what you need to be able to play bebop, but as you've seen in these exercises and examples, they're not the whole story. To really nail the bebop sound, you need a solid foundation with enclosures, chromatic passing notes, and good phrasing. And that's exactly what I cover in this next video, where I also break down Barry Harris' genius system for chromatic notes. It's guaranteed to transform your playing. Check it out, learn jazz, make music.